We're going to continue our conversation about Roe v. Wade and the Dobbs case that was before the Supreme Court this morning. We're going to continue that conversation into the night. In fact, tonight's edition of Pray Vote Stand is going to be focused on this. After a half century of the right of this, after a half century, we'll have the opportunity to correct this wrong of Roe v. Wade. The question is this the year? Is this the case? We're going to talk about that tonight. We're going to be joined by ADF attorney Erin Hawley, who actually happens to be the wife of Senator Josh Hawley. Mary Sock will be joining us. We just heard from her earlier, and David Clausen. That's at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I encourage you to tune in for Pray Vote Stand, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, prayvotestand.org. Now, it may not be clear how the Supreme Court will rule after today's oral arguments in this major abortion case, Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, but one thing is clear. The pro-life movement has come a long way since the infamous 1973 Roe v. Wade decision legalized abortion on demand through all 9 months of pregnancy. And it is largely because of dedicated men and women who have refused to back down and have tirelessly committed themselves to speaking up for and defending the unborn. Joining me now to talk about this and how we got to this point today is Brent Keilen, Vice President of FRC Action. Brent Keilen, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thank you, Tony. Good to be with you.
I was just thinking about this as I was talking earlier with trying to remember the guest we had on talking about this. I guess it was Senator Cotton. This thought came to mind when we were discussing the impact that the pro-life community has had on politics. I mean, I think of Senator Cotton. I think of the number of pro-life senators that we have and the fact that today every member of the Republican House, in the House, on the Republican side of the House, is pro-life, or at least states a position of pro-life. We've come a long way.
Tony, we really have. And, as we have been involved, America really has become more pro-life. And the progress, as you pointed out earlier, we've got a long ways to go, but the progress really is undeniable. And millions of people committed on this issue who have demonstrated courage and persistence, having those conversations with friends and neighbors and family and winning hearts and minds. And Tony, I think to put this in perspective, it's something when you think about the fact that, almost 50 years ago when we received the Roe v. Wade ruling, we didn't really have a pro-life movement, not in the sense of the pro-life movement that we have today. It took a while to put that together. In some cases, with some groups, it took years for people to know, how do we respond to this? What do we do? How do we organize? And it took a long time to build that infrastructure, but we are seeing the fruit of it now. As you mentioned, Tony, with these elected leaders, I think there's a number of key factors that play into this. The role of the state legislatures has been huge. The role of good judges has been huge. And then, one of these outcomes is the fact that the pro-life position is now mainstream within the Republican Party. That was not always the case. Not that long ago, actually, high-level officials, establishment Republicans would ignore the issue, downplay it, and sometimes actually undermine it. So we really have come a very long way in the defense of the unborn.
No question about that. I've seen that even in my time in the political arena. Back to when I was first elected, having a pro-life position was not mainstream within the Republican Party. There was a lot of pro-choice Republicans. That is not the case. In fact, in the last presidential, in the 2016 Republican primary, 17 candidates, only one had a stated position of being pro-choice. So clearly you're right. But also we've seen at the state level, you mentioned those state legislators that have been elected because of pro-life activists, and many of them are pro-life. But we've seen a record number of pro-life laws that have been passed in the last decade alone.
Tony, we have. And again, to put this in perspective, Roe v. Wade been around for about 50 years, but half of the pro-life legislation that has actually been enacted since Roe v. Wade. Half of that has come in just the last 10 years, which is some incredible momentum on behalf of life. That's amounted to 580 pro-life bills being passed at the state level, not just introduced, but actually passed at the state level over the past 10 years. And those are the types of laws that have put the pressure on the courts to have to take these cases up, like we're seeing today with Dobbs, saying, these are laws in defense of life. We're going to protect life at every chance we get, and it really is making an impact. And I think it also points to the importance of those local races. Oftentimes those are overlooked. The federal races, the presidential race get most of the focus, but and those are obviously incredibly important. But the state level is really where we've been able to move and advance the ball down the field on behalf of life over the last 10 years. And it's, again, it's truly making an impact there.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the scripture, do not grow weary in well-doing, for in due season
That's right.
we will reap. And I think this is it. And we got to continue to pray, continue to work. There's a lot more work to be done. In fact, if Roe v. Wade is overturned and this issue goes back to the states, there'll be a lot more work for Christians and pro-life Americans to do. Brent Keilen, thanks so much for joining us. Always great to talk with you.
Thank you, Tony. Good to be with you.